Teacher, your audio is off.
Thank you, Carlos. You're right. So, as I was saying, thank you very much for being early today. We're going to continue with the, with the speaking section, with our excursus on the speaking section, and we are now arriving to a very interesting part of this section, which is the integrated task, the integrated tasks. And these integrated tasks are very interesting because they are going to allow you to combine many of your skills and abilities in English in order to speak, of course, right? Which is obviously the essential part of this section. But you're going to find that it's very interesting in the sense that there are some special tricks that I'm going to teach you in this case in order for you to ace this section and this particular tasks. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to share my screen with you. And let's see. So, okay, so as I was saying, today we're going to begin with the TOEFL speaking section task number 2, which is the integrated speaking section. Okay, for those of you who were present last class, you remind that this listening section is basically all about responding to some questions that that ETS or the enterprise is going to question you about some material you received. In the first task that we were seeing last week, it was just about responding to a statement, right? Asking you to take a position and to decide what specific side you would like to defend and sustain, and then you would give your response. In this case, for the second task, what we're going to do is simply to, first of all, read a passage that is going to be about any academic subject, and later you're going to receive another item, which is going to be, in this case, a listening passage or a listening conversation. And that conversation is going to be related to the statement, to the reading passage, or to the statement you just read. Okay, it's going to be most probably a student commenting on that specific passage. And what you're going to do later, it's simply to receive all those items and materials. And what you have to do after that, it's simply to prepare your response and to deliver a response summarizing both items. Okay. Another thing very important is that you have to, in this case, take a lot of notes. Okay. You can take notes, of course, not only on the listening part, which is obviously the most crucial one for you to take notes, but you can also take notes on the reading passage. That is to say, if you notice some important points, you can take your sheet of paper and write them down. Okay. And the same is going to apply as well for the reading, excuse me, for the listening conversation you're going to listen to. Okay, but let's get into the presentation. So for this task, as I was saying, you will be reading a short written passage that is 80 to 100 words long, approximately. Okay, it's always varied, but nevertheless, it's not going to be more than this. It is mostly an announcement, okay, about a change happening to campus as a shift in class schedules or a new bus service, for example. It's always going to be something related to news that could take place in a university. Okay, it's a super didactic and entertaining passage to read. It's not very much complicated. Okay, next you will be listening to a conversation regarding the announcement. Okay, as I say, you're going to receive a conversation of two students, of speakers, and one of those speakers will be expressing their opinion about the news. Your job simply here is to summarize both materials. Okay, here is how the timing works. You're going to have 45 seconds to read the passage, the reading passage, and you're going to have, after you have read the passage, immediately it's going to pop up to your screen the audio or the conversation, and you're going to have 1 minute to listen to it. After that, you're going to have 30 seconds of preparation, that is to say, to prepare your response with all the notes you have taken, and also 60 seconds to deliver your response. Those are the timings. Okay. For those students who are arriving, I'm going to repeat it super quickly. Okay, so don't forget to have your cameras on, by the way. Okay, so as you can see, we are in the second task of the speaking section. Okay, this integrated speaking is super easy, as I was commenting. This task, it's going to basically consist on the following. You will be reading a short written passage, okay, that is 80 to 100 words long. It will be mostly an announcement about changes happening in the campus or to the campus, okay, as a shift in the class schedules, for example, or a new bus service, or something related to new buildings, stuff like that, okay? Something that could be happening and taking place in the university. You're going to receive that passage, you're going to read it, and after that, you're going to receive immediately a conversation that will be regarding the announcement. That is to say, that you're going to have two speakers, and one of them is going to be giving their opinion about the news or about the passage you just read about. Imagine that your passage was about, for example, as the illustrations there, it was about a change in the bus service, for example. So this student on your conversation or in your audio is going to be discussing that. That is to say, is going to be commenting what his opinion is, if he considers that it's appropriate. You're gonna see it, okay? Because we're gonna practice today as well. So finally, here you have the timing. That is to say, how much time you will have to do every specific task or to perform in every specific task. For reading the passage, you're gonna receive first. You're gonna have 45 seconds. Okay, as I say, throughout this section, it's always very important. I'm gonna come back to this part of the presentation. Throughout this entire section, you will be required to write down some notes. Okay, in order to organize and plan your responses. Likewise, since the second independent task, you will take notes about the listening items you will receive. So as we are going to practice today, of course, you're going to be able to take some notes, okay? So don't forget that, especially for the listening conversation and for the listening audio, what you have to do is to write down some notes about the important topics, the elementary topics that have been discussed in this specific audio or item, okay? So those are the timings. As you can see, in this specific integrated task, you're going to have, first of all, your passage. You're going to read, you're going to read that passage about a change in this university. And later, you're going to receive your conversation that is going to be about 1 minute of duration. And that conversation is going to contain two or more speakers talking about their opinion about this specific change made in the university. And what you have to do later is to prepare your response in 30 seconds and to deliver your response in 60 seconds, okay? So let's go and see how is this really going to look like, okay? So I have some examples here prepared for you. And we're going to, of course, be able to understand pretty well, I think, how this section is going to look like, first of all, in the actual exam, and also how so that you have to perform, because I have prepared some examples of my own. I have recorded my voice, and you're going to be able to listen to how I responded. And of course, it's going to be awesome if you follow something very similar to what I did. Okay, so first of all, let's read the passage. As I say, it's super short. I'm going to paste it on the chat box. Of course, you're going to be able to, as we'll see it here on my screen. But nevertheless, if you want to have it there and paste it maybe to a Word document, whatever, you have the text right there. So first of all, obviously, you're going to listen to a voice reading this first text, right? It's going to say, the university is planning to offer a free language course. Read the short article announcement. Give yourself 4 or 5 seconds to read the article, then listen to students discussing the same topic, okay? So then you have to read, you're going to have your 4 or 5 seconds to read. In this case, just let us read, and then we are going to listen to the example I did, okay? So it says, university to offer free Spanish courses this trimester. Due to an influx of exchange students from Spain and Latin America, starting this trimester, the university will be offering free Spanish language tuition for interested parties. Participation in these courses is limited. However, preference will be given to those students taking part in activities directly related to the exchange program. So go to the university website for further details. Okay, that is the passage. This is something super similar. Trust me, I've taken this exam twice, and the passage in this case and for this specific section is always similar. It's just with the same wording, something super trivial in some cases for any change or new that is going to happen in this university. Okay, so this is the passage, and then well, after you have read it, you're going to listen the audio. That is going to be, of course, something like this. So let's listen to the audio, okay?
Now
take your notes, of course. Grab your piece of paper, grab a pen, and take your notes on this specific audio, because it's going to be useful for you to get used to it and to have a very good understanding when I I let you listen to my response. Okay, so let's listen.
Listen to two students discussing the Spanish classes.
What do you think about the Spanish courses the university is offering?
I'm not sure. I mean, last semester they did the same thing with an IT course and it was booked out within 10 minutes of the registration from going online.
You think it'll be the same for this?
Well, yeah, Spanish is a popular language to learn, and look at what it says about the preferences given. There are going to be loads of students who fit the bill for preferential access.
Well, I'm going to give it a look anyway. I might get lucky.
Sure, to be honest, I think it would be better if they didn't make the course free. A lot of people will sign up just because they don't have to pay anything, then not turn up to half of the classes. If you have to pay for something, you're more likely to use it.
I'm not sure. I mean, this way it's accessible even to poorer students.
I guess so. I suppose I'm still annoyed that I couldn't do the IT course last semester. I really needed the chance to brush up on my computing skills.
All right, wonderful.
Now,
So as you can see, that is going to happen after you have read your passage. A audio conversation is going to pop up immediately to your screen. You're going to listen to it just as we did right now. And after that, you're going to have 30 seconds in order to prepare your response. Okay, so imagine that those 30 seconds have already happened. And here is a very good example of how a response will have to look like before we get into how to do it, before I teach you how to elaborate your response to. So let's listen to how I responded to this specific question. Okay, so listen. In the reading passage, we observed that the university wants to offer free Spanish courses since next trimester to all students, but especially to those who are engaged with exchange programs. On the other hand, we also observe a student who disagrees with this modality because she considers that just as it happened with the IT classes, so many people, just because the courses are free, are going to register and many students are going to stay out of the lessons. She also considers that given that Spanish is a very popular language, many students will also be super interested in learning this language and many people will simply stay out of the lessons. She also considers that the university should make these courses not free but pay, and that way just the students who are really interested in these courses will take part of them and not just the students who, because the courses are free, get into. Wonderful. So as you can see, that is a example of how you should respond to this specific task and with our specific illustration, okay? So now before we listen to another one, because I have prepared another one, let's go to some recommendations and a little bit of the structure of how you should organize your response, okay? So look at this, recommendations for the second task questions, okay? So for this section, you must be very general, okay, and concise while summarizing both materials you will receive, okay? Nonetheless, if you're going to emphasize in one item, let it be in the listening item. Namely, spend more time summarizing the conversation you just listened to, all right? So if you pay attention to my illustration, the one that I let you listen to, I pay way more attention and I spend way more time talking about what the conversation said. That is to say, I spend a lot of time talking about the opinion of the student, why she considered these courses would not be effective, why she considered the university should make it free, not make it free, but make it paid. I spend a lot of time on that specific part, rather than, for example, emphasizing a lot on the reading passage, because I know for sure that it is not a very good idea, it is not accurate to spend a lot of time on that specific part. Why? Because, well, you know, it's super easy to just go and try to, well, to say exactly the same than the reading passage says, right? You could actually read it and that's it. Nevertheless, if you pay more attention to the listening item, the reviewer that is going to listen to your audio and is going to punctuate your response, he's going to say, well, I mean, this student is able to well, first of all, to understand and later to synthesize all the information that he listened to and not only to what he read, okay? So it's very important for you to try to always emphasize, as I say, not only with time, but also with your words and with your efforts on the item, which is the listening part, that is to say the conversation, okay? Try to give it more attention to that part, all right? So Another thing that you maybe have noticed is that it's not necessary to specifically state what person in the conversation said any specific thing. Avoid expressions like this one. The woman said this and then the man responded this. Or he added this and she later said this. Focus only on what the main speaker mentions and use the expressions given by the other speaker just as supplementary data. If you notice what my illustration was like, I simply try to, well, to focus on what the main speaker said, and I utilize everything the other man added to the conversation just as additional data. I never said, for example, first of all, the female student said this, and then the male student responded this, and later she said this. I didn't do or I didn't mention that specific, interchange of dialogue. No, it's not necessary to do it. Why? Because in the responses, ETS has as an example, it is never required to do this. It's actually unnecessary. It's certainly counterproductive because you are somehow deviating the attention of your reviewer to something that is trivial, that is trifling, that is not really important, right? But if you focus on what the main speaker is saying, and if you try to summarize whatever the speaker is saying, his opinion, her opinion, what she believes, the arguments she gives, utilizes, that is going to, of course, be well regarded by your reviewer. Okay, so try to avoid this type of expressions mentioning the interchange of dialogue. It's not recommendable. Okay, so now before we get into these recommendations, let's listen to the another illustration that I have for you. Okay, so this is a different one. I'm gonna as well let you have the reading passage. I'm gonna paste it here in the chat box so you can well, you can move it to another document maybe, but of course you're going to be able to have it here too. Okay, so as you can see, you're going to have 4 or 5 seconds to read this. So in this case, let's just let us read together. Okay, the campus fitness center says will permanently close at the end of this semester. This decision was made by the university administration in coordination with representatives of the Students Association. Unfortunately, the building currently housing the center is very old, and the university can no longer afford the cost of maintaining it or providing heat and air conditioning as required. Furthermore, the popularity of the center has declined since the university formed partnerships with several private fitness centers in the city. These partnerships mean that all full and part-time students can access 5 privately owned gyms across the city at no cost. Okay, so you will have your 4 or 5 seconds to read this, and immediately after that, the conversation is going to pop up. So let's listen to it, okay?
What do you think about this announcement?
To be honest, I'm completely opposed to the plan.
Really? Why?
Because shutting down the fitness center isn't really going to save much money. I mean, sure, the building is really old, but even if it isn't used on a regular basis, the school still has to maintain it. They have to make sure it is safe and that it doesn't become a fire hazard or something like that.
I didn't think about that.
Right, and even tearing the building down will be expensive because of all the construction workers they'll have to hire. Plus, once it's gone, we're going to need to replace it with something new, so we shouldn't shut down the gym just to save money.
You make a good point.
And it's not like all the students can easily use the gyms in the city. The closest one is a 30-minute drive from school. How are people who live in dorms on campus supposed to reach them if they don't have their own car?
You know, I took a taxi to one of the gyms and it cost nearly $20. I can't afford to pay them much money every time I want to exercise.
Exactly. And even if you can afford to pay for a taxi, it will be really challenging to get one if you want to exercise late at night. I don't think that was really considered when the decision to close the fitness center was made.
Wonderful. So as you can see, after this happens or after this conversation ends, what is going to happen is that immediately there's going to be a message on your computer on the actual day or on the actual exam, of course, and it's going to say, well, begin to prepare your response. You're going to have your 30 seconds. Imagine that those have already happened, and then you will have to respond in 1 minute, as you're going to be able to see right now. So let's listen to my response to this specific item. Let's listen. To begin with, we have seen in the reading passage that the university plans to close the campus fitness center permanently because they consider that nobody uses it and because they consider that students can go to the private gyms that they have hired across the city, and also because the maintenance costs for these fitness centers are too high for the university. On the other hand, we have seen that a student disagrees with this because he considers that this is not going to save money. The university will still have to maintain the buildings, and maybe these buildings are going to provoke a fire, and that is going to cost a lot of money. He also considers that if they want to demolish it, they will have to pay workers, and that is also going to cost a lot of money. He also considers that the alternative gyms are not easily reached by other students because they are far away from the university, they are too expensive, and many people who work out by night will not be able to find a taxi. Wonderful. So as you can see, this was a very long conversation in the sense that it had a lot of details. So it was difficult, of course, to implement the principal ones into the response. But I think this was a very good example of how to respond to the second task of the speaking section. Okay, so now let's come back to our presentation and let's see some other recommendations I have for you. It's going to be advantageous if you prepare your response sheet in the interlude between the first task and the second one, that is the one that we are, of course, learning about right now, with the outlines you'll follow. Namely, try to write down the first phrase you'll say and your transitions so that you can fill the rest once you receive your material. What do I mean by this? So after, of course, you have finished the first speaking task, that is to say the first one that we have seen last week, and that we are going to continue, of course, discussing with the other students who have recently joined to our courses. After you finish the first task and you move on to the second task, you're going to have a time, of course, of 5 seconds maybe until the program says and changes the material, stuff like that. So once you have that specific interlude, what you should do is try to always have your paper with the phrases you are going to use as the introduction to your response in the second task, and what you're going to say as well in order to connect it, that is to say your transitions, with the conversation. Okay, for example, imagine this is your paper on the day of the exam. So in an interlude between the first task to the second task, you should actually begin to write down what you're going to say. For example, if you listen to my responses, I always begin by saying, to begin with, in the reading passage, etc., etc. And after I have finished to comment on the reading passage, I move on by saying, on the other hand, and I continue talking about the opinion of the first speaker, right? So as you can see, you could, of course, try to have this prepared on that interlude so that when the time arrives for you to respond, what you're going to do is just to finish, to fill your paper, right? That is to say, you're going to say, well, to begin with, in the reading passage says, and you're going to begin to fill this blank space with everything you have with everything you have reading about, or whatever you have considered that is the important part and the important facts and information mentioned in the passage and also mentioned in the conversation. Okay, so in this case, you would only have to fill it with the rest of the material and with the rest of the things you're going to include on your specific response. All right, so that is another recommendation I have for you. Also, while responding, it may be useful to set your eyes on your papers where you have outlined all the points you are going to mention from the materials. This way, you're not going to get distracted, nor you will get out of what you had planned to respond. I am going to comment what happened in my experience. It happened to me that when I was taking this exam last year, well, actually, when I took it first in 2020, I began to respond to this specific task, and because I was kind of like looking to the people who were around me and surrounding me, and the staff members and the computers and all these things, I got distracted, and it was there was a time in my response that I simply like disconnected myself from my own reasoning train of my ideas. So I discovered that the second time I took the TOEFL, if I maintain my eyes set to my paper, that is to say, this sheet of paper where you have already outlined everything you're going to say in your response, you're going to be way more concentrated because you're going to constantly be observing what you're going to say next, of course, right? So this is my recommendation. It's going to be better, I think, if you maintain your eyes looking at your paper, okay? So now, as you can see, there is a structure that I follow, and I want to share that with you. How is it that you should structure your response? Of course, okay, so there are 4 specific steps that I recommend you to follow. For example, look at what I have done in this case, okay? So I begin always by saying to begin with, and I continue, right? In the reading passage, here comes whatever the passage said, okay? So if you listen to, for example, to my second illustration, I began by saying, to begin with, in the reading passage, it has been stated that the university plans to shut down the Explorer Centers building, okay? So what you have to do in all your responses, remind that this was something that I was commenting with another student. Remind that there is just going to be 1 second task you're going to be able to respond in the TOEFL exam. That is to say, you're not going to take this specific task twice or 3 times or 4 times. No, you're just going to have 1 second task. That is to say, you're just going to have one first task, 1 second task, one third task, and one fourth task. That is to say, you can plan exactly what to say. That is to say, you can follow this structure in order to organize your response, and your reviewer is never going to say, oh, she's super repetitive. She always says, for example, or he always says and begins with the same. No, because he is going to be able to listen to your response once. That is to say, he is going to listen to you responding to this specific task just once. He's never going to listen to you practicing for it or responding to this twice or 3 times. No, just once. Okay, so you can absolutely go to this test center and take your exam having already planned what you're going to say in your responses with regard to this structure. I mean, right? To say, that is to say, you can have planned your first phrase, that would be this one, to begin with in the reading passage, and after that you complement it with the information you received in the reading passage, and as well as a transition from this specific reading passage to what the speaker said in the conversation. You can say, on the other hand, and here would come what the conversation is about, right? As you remind, I said, on the other hand, and the student disagrees with this change because, and that would be the third step. That is to say, the first speaker's reason in order to maintain his or her opinion about this specific topic. In this case, I began to say, right, the student considers that it is not going to be or is not going to save a lot of money for a university to shut it down because I began, right? And I continue to give the second speaker's reason. And sometimes there are more reasons. In this case, if you listen to the second illustration, the student gave a lot of responses. That is, he gave a lot of arguments. So I always try to summarize every single one of them. So the list would continue here with all those reasons the speaker gave in order to sustain his opinion, right? So as you can see, this is the structure you have to follow. Simply begin by saying, to begin with, in the reading passage, and later you add whatever your passage is about, right? In my case, you have seen my examples. We're gonna practice right now, of course. After you have said something super concise and general about the first passage or the reading passage, you just say, on the other hand, that is to say, you're using this transition to connect this passage with your conversation. And there you state whatever the conversation is about, right? You state it, you say, well, the student disagrees with this or agrees with this, and you later say, well, because of these reasons, and you begin to say, right, because he considers this, that will be your first speaker's reason, and because of this, that will be your second speaker's reason, and because of this and this and this, if there are more reasons he or she has in order to sustain her opinion, all right? So that is the idea. Is there any question about this? Maybe you want me to repeat something in Spanish? Please tell me. I will gladly help you. Any question about this or whatever we have said until this point? Any question? Listen to you. No, no questions? Nobody? Okay, wonderful.
Teacher, one question.
Okay, yeah, for sure, Carlos.
In the test center, are we going to see the reading passage, or it's going to disappear as soon as we listen to the audio?
Okay, very good question, by the way. It is going to disappear in this case, okay? After you have read it and after that disappears and you receive your listening conversation, that is going to disappear. I mean, you're not going to be able to read it again, okay? In this case, as for example, it happened as it happens in the writing section, for example, or in the reading section, you are able to observe the reading passage during you are preparing your response and stuff. But nevertheless, in this case, you're just going to have the question itself that is going to say, well, summarize the points made in the passage and in the lecture, or in this case, in the conversation, right? So you have to, as I said, take notes throughout this entire items you receive. That is to say, when you are reading your passage, write down in your sheet paper all the main points you want to, of course, talked about in your response. And once the conversation arrives to, you have to do exactly the same. Listen to it, and while you're listening, go and take notes, right? The speaker is saying this and this and this and this, and then in your 30 seconds of preparation, you're going to be able to, well, to respond to it, of course. Is it clear?
Yes, teacher. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Any other question? Any other question about what we have said until this point? No question? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have any question, or if you want me to clarify something, of course. Okay, so we're gonna have some exercises now. It's your turn. We're gonna listen. In this case, there are no more responses recorded by me, but nevertheless, we're going to listen to older material, and we are going to, of course, try to make a response. Okay, collaborating with all of you. All right, so let's go and see this one.
And the talk.
All right, so
after the question,
let's listen. Okay, so this is going to be a very good example of how this would look like. So let's listen right from the beginning. Okay, so imagine this is your first, task. For those of you, okay, I remind that there are some of you who have not seen the first task. Don't worry about it. As I have already told you, it is not going to be necessary for you to have been in the classes where we have discussed the first task, because this is completely independent, friend. Okay, so, but the only thing I want you to know, super general, before I get into this example, is super general information about this section. That is to say, this part. Okay, it's very important for you to know that the first question or the first task you're going to receive is an independent task. In what sense? That this task specifically, it's simply going to be a statement that is going to ask you to agree, disagree, or to take a position with regard to the topic presented there. For example, the first task could be something like, what do you prefer, cats or dogs? Argument why? And in your response, you will have simply to argue why is it that you, imagine that you prefer cats, right? You will have to simply state why I said that you prefer cats. You will have to defend your position, defend your ideas, okay? And once you finish that specific task, the first one, you move on to this independent tasks. That is the one that we are beginning to learn about this class. The second task, and next class we're going to learn about the third one. Okay. So as you have been able to see, this integrated tasks are basically, first of all, receiving a reading passage, and after that, receiving a conversation of a listening item, and this is an audio basically. And after you have received these two materials, you have to make a response summarizing both materials. In this case, you don't have to give your opinion. That is something that I want to mention, and actually that I didn't make so much emphasis into. In this case, you remind that for the last specific task, I was recommending you to be like this man that we have here on the screen. This is Ben Shapiro, for those of you who do not know him, a very famous debater. He's super famous because he's very good at defending his position, whether or not you agree with him. Everybody recognizes that he's super good at defending it, okay? So in this case, for the first task, you have to be like him. Why? Because in the first task, that is to say, in the independent one, as I just told you, you're going to have to defend your own position and idea. If you like cats more than dogs, you're going to have to defend it. But nevertheless, in this case, when we are arriving to the integrated speaking, you don't have to be like Ben Shapiro, but you have to be like if you were a journalist, okay? I want you to identify this integrated speaking task number 2, the one that we have learned this class, with a journalist. Why? Because you are going to assume the role of a journalist. Why is that? Well, because in this case, if you were able to listen to my illustrations of the responses I gave, you don't have to state your opinion. If you, for example, believe and consider that in our illustration, right, that the change that the university made in the specific sports center was wrong, you don't have to say if you believe that is the case. No, you simply have to summarize what the speakers said and what the passage said. You have simply to receive your material and to summarize it and to express it. That is to say, everything was mentioned in the reading passage and everything was mentioned in the conversation. In any case, you have to give your opinion. If you believe the passage is wrong, if you believe the opinion of this student is wrong, never say it. In this case, you're just a journalist, right? A journalist never gives his opinion. He's just trying to convey what the sources that he has been studying or she has been studying say. That is to say, you don't have to give your opinion, okay? So I wanted to I wanted to make sure that you understand, all right? And finally, I just wanted to remind you, throughout this entire section, you always are going to be required to have your sheet of paper, something like this, and you're going to have to take some notes, of course. Okay, so don't worry about bringing this to the test center if you are taking the IBT version, because if you're taking the IBT version, you're going to have the staff members lending you and handing you over a lot of these papers and pens and everything you need to write down your responses. But what you have to worry about simply to take notes, right? To, if you have, for example, read these passages as we have done in this class, write down the specific or the most elementary elements and points made in that specific passage. Also write about the specific points the speaker has done or has specifically used in, you know, in his or her intervention in the conversation. If she said that she disagree, why she disagree, take notes, okay? Take notes throughout this entire section, okay? So now, after I have clarified that, maybe any question about that, something that I have said until this point, before we move on to the examples I have prepared for you? Any question about this? What I have mentioned? Questions? Okay, any question? All right, wonderful. I guess no. Okay, so let's move on then to some order examples, okay? And in this case, I'm going to require your help, as I said. Okay, so let's move on to, okay, so after you have finished your first task, this is going to happen, okay? Listen.
Number 2. In this question, you will read a short passage about a campus situation and then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then answer a question using information from both the reading passage and the talk.
This is the interlude I mentioned to you, where you should always grab your piece of paper and begin to write down things like this. To begin with, on your hands and stuff like that, right? You began to say, well, and here I'm going to write down about the first reason, second reason. This is the interlude, I say, because there's always this time in which the instructor is clarifying what this task is going to be about, as if you were not taking classes in order to know that, right? But he's presupposing that, okay? But let's listen.
After the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. City University's choir is changing its performance schedule next year. Read an article about it in the student newspaper. You will have 50 seconds to read the article. Begin reading now.
Okay, so please read it. Going to give you this time, and later I'm going to read it aloud to you so that you can listen to it. Okay, that's it. Now I'm going to read it aloud so you can listen to it. So it says, currently, the university choir gives singing concerts only on campus, okay? Next year, however, the choir will add competitive events at other locations to its schedule. The choir's new director feels that entering singing competitions will make the quality of the choir's performance even better than it is now. Competitions will motivate the students in the choir to pursue a higher standard of excellence in singing, he said. In addition, it is hoped that getting the choir off campus and out in the public will strengthen the reputation of the university's music program, and this in turn will help the program grow. So that would be the reading passage. So listen to what will happen after that.
Now, listen to two students discussing the article.
Jim, you're in the choir, right? What do you think?
Take your notes, okay? Don't forget. We're gonna respond to this together.
Discussing the article.
Jim, you're in the choir, right? What do you think about what they're doing next year? This article.
I really like it.
Yeah?
Yeah, the new director's right that it will motivate us.
How's that?
Well, some of the other schools are really good, so we'll really have to work hard to go up against them.
Yeah.
I mean, right now we don't rehearse more than once a week, but if we know we'd be competing with other schools, we probably rehearse more often and improve our singing a lot.
That's true. The more you practice, the better you get. So, what about what the article said about how this will help the program?
I hope it works. Right now, our program is pretty small, but we have some really talented people, and it would be great to attract even more people.
So, how will this plan help?
Well, if we go to these off-campus events and other people hear us and think we're really good, we might be able to get some new students interested in coming to this university, to be a part of our music program and perform in our choir concerts.
You're right. I hadn't really thought about that.
The man expresses his opinion about the change described in the article. Briefly summarize the change, then state his opinion about the change and explain the reasons he gives for holding that opinion.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep.
Okay, so this is exactly how the exam looks like. Okay, looks like, excuse me. So as you can see, it's basically the written passage, the instructor saying, now listen to this conversation, the instructor again expressing you what the order or what the instruction is in order to respond to this question, and then a woman says, begin to prepare your response after the beep, and your 30 seconds begin to be counted, okay? So of course, you don't have to listen to what he says in this specific part. That is to say, when he's saying, well, the man expresses his opinion, blah, 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 that's not really important, right? Because you know what you have to do. That's why you're taking these classes. You have to simply summarize what first of all, the reading passage said and what the conversation said. So when this begins, you have to take those extra seconds in order to prepare your response. Don't even listen to it because it's, as you can see, it's simply a redundant information because you're preparing for this. Okay, so begin to write down your response following what the structure that I have shared with you. That is to say, this structure. To begin with, in the reading passage, here comes whatever the passage said. Okay, I want to request your help. So, for example, Carlos, in this case, I mean, just not super specifically, but what would you say about the reading passage? What are those general aspects that you wrote out about? Because tomorrow we're gonna practice. Every single one of you is gonna practice tomorrow an entire specific section. But nevertheless, I want to listen to your commentaries in this specific part. What would you have said, Carlos?
Okay, I would say something like this. To begin with, in the reading passage, it's talking about university choir giving singing concerts, and this university it's wanted to participate into competitive events, and also this is going to make a better quality and the stuff excellent. Will strengthen also by showing this student the reputation of the university. And in the second dialogue, the girls she agrees with the idea because she thinks that it's going to motivate the students, because in other schools the students are very, very, very talented. And this is going to help to the small program because they're already talented people but because of this concerts, the students from other schools or from other universities are going to sign in to the university.
Wonderful. Very good response. Very good response. So as you can see, Carlos followed the template that I gave him. To begin with, in the reading passage, he mentioned everything that he considered was important and elementary in the reading passage. So just remember that it's always better if you are super concise and general about that part. He later said, on the other hand, and he began to express everything that the speaker said, right? In this case, the speaker actually agreed, was super content with this decision to move the choir to move the choir out of the campus in order to have it competing against other universities and stuff like that, right? And He also mentioned the reasons why this student specifically considers this decision to be right. He said, well, the university or the choir now is going to be is going to have the opportunity to practice way more, because actually the student mentions that they're just practicing once, right? Throughout the week, they're just practicing once. Nevertheless, he considers that now, given that they're going to go to these competitions, they're going to have the opportunity to practice more times. Very good. So he moved on to the second reason the student gave. He said this would motivate other students who are not part of our program at the university to join us and to be part of our program. And that way our level is also going to increase, right? Wonderful. So that is exactly what you have to do. To begin with, in the reading passage, you said, you say what the reading passage was about. On the other hand, you mention what the speaker opinion is. If he agrees or if he disagrees, you mention his first reason in order to have that opinion, his second reason in order to have that opinion, and that's it. You have to do that in 1 minute, okay? So don't worry, tomorrow we're gonna practice. Tomorrow's class is going to be only practical, so we're gonna have the opportunity to continue with this. I would like to listen to another person. What would you have said, for example, Marines? What would you have said, for example, just for the first part, that is to say, to begin with in the reading passage, what would you have said with regard to that part, to the reading passage? Your mic is off, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
To begin with, in the reading passage, they talk about changing the choir schedule next year because they want to make them participate in competitions so they will improve or increase their level that they have right now. I continue?
No, and to the point, it's wonderful. So as you can see, that is exactly what you have to do. Very good, Marina. So you simply, super general, like not even spending 10 seconds in this, you just say it, like super general and concisely. They have talked, or the reading passage said this, you move on, right? Wonderful. So how will you have continue on the other hand, and what would be the rest?
On the other hand, the two students were talking about how do they feel about these changes. So the student that participates in the choir, he feels really happy with it. He thinks they will be more motivated because now they will have more rehearsals, because now they only rehearse once a week. So they will practice more, so they will continue improving their level in order to participate in these competitions. So he hopes also that these competitions will help them attract some more students to join the choir.
Yeah, wonderful. It's perfect. Just as Carlos' response is very good. As you can see, that is exactly what you have to do for the rest of your students. To begin with, the reading passage, you move on, 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 and that would be your response. Okay, so I want to let this minutes now to let you have any question. Maybe you want to ask about any specific part of our discussion today. Please feel free to do it right now. I will be very gladly to help you. Any question about, for example, your structure, maybe you want some specific advice for this section, something, please. I listen to you. Carolina, Claudia, Alvaro, what about you? Do you have any question? Bonnie, Miguel Angel Silva, Laura Choque, any question about this? Or is it clear?
Excuse me, what was the time that we should declare when we're speaking?
Oh, all right. So
section.
Oh yeah, for sure. Wonderful. So in this case, as you can see here, this will be the timing you would have for this section. You're going to have 45 seconds in order to, well, to read, first of all, to the reading passage, the one that always mentions something, some sort of new or event that is going on campus. Later, you're going to have this audio clip of about 1 minute in order for you to listen to it, the conversation, you listen. And after that, you're going to have 30 seconds of preparation, okay? 30 seconds of preparation. in order to begin to fill your response, right? So remind that you have to, you should also, or you should always have this paper already organized this way, with the first phrase to begin with, the written passage on the other hand. So, and this 30 seconds of preparation, the only thing you're going to do is begin to fill, right? To fill this blank spaces with the information you received in the written passage and also in the conversation. And after that, you're going to have 60 seconds, that is to say 1 minute, just 1 minute to respond. If you listen to the examples I gave at the beginning of the class, at the middle as well, my responses were always of 1 minute, and it's just about that. Okay, if you exceed that time, that is not going to be recorded. That is to say, the recording always stops at 1 minute. Okay, if you exceed that time, that is simply not going to be listened, and your reviewer is not going to be able to consider it for the scoring he's going to give you. Okay, so always try to maintain you in this specific limit here, that is 60 seconds. Okay, any question now, or is it clear now?
Yes, and while we are speaking, can we just read while we took the notes?
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Yes, while we are speaking, can we just see what were our notes?
Yeah, exactly. If you remind, for example, when I gave you this specific recommendation, it is going to be actually super useful for you to set your eyes on your paper, actually, where you have outlined all the material or all the points that you're going to include in your response, because this way you're not going to get distracted, right? So while you are responding, because you're going to have, of course, for those of you who don't know, if you are taking the IoT version, you're going to have this specific type of headphones. So, well, you're going to have your headphones here and the microphone here directed to your mouth, right? So what is going to happen is that you're going to have this space here. So it's super important, and it's my recommendation for you to have your paper before you, that is to say in front of you, and to have your eyes set directly on the paper. And you're going to read here, and if you had something to complement, you complement it. You keep looking at your paper, you move on, you respond. But yeah, I mean, it is completely legal, that is to say you're actually going to be encouraged to look at your sheet of responses with all your notes and with all the preparation you have given. Is it clear now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, wonderful. So that's it. Okay, as you can see. Any other question, maybe? Okay, no more questions. So before you get out of the class, I'm gonna take attendance. Okay, so please stay with me, because you're gonna have to say present. And for those of you who don't know, we always have a anonymous poll after we finish every single class. This is anonymous, as I say, but please respond to it according to what you have considered was appropriate for this class. Read please the questions and respond to it, okay? While I take the assistance, so please stay with me, okay? So I'm going to begin to call the list, so please pay attention to your name. It said here, for example, Alcoba Rivero Maria Fernanda. Alcoba Rivero Maria Fernanda. Okay, it's not here. Caballero Lopez Carlos.
Hello, teacher, I'm here.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Callejas Marines Genesis.
Here, teacher.
Wonderful, thank you. What about Carolina Guaroto?
Here, present.
Right, wonderful, thank you. What about Yandira Lisette? Okay, she's not here. Yandira Lisette. Bonnie Taira Ugarte?
Here.
Wonderful, thank you. And now we move on to the other group. It said here, well, it said here Claudia Patricia Jennifer.
Yes, present.
Thank you very much. What about Laura Leticia Mamani?
Present.
Here. Wonderful, thank you. What about Álvaro Chayapa?
I am here, teacher.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. And now, finally, Silva Plata, Miguel Ángel.
Present, teacher. I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much, dear students, for for your responses and for your attendance today. See you tomorrow. Okay, bye bye.
Bye, teacher.
Bye,
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye,
See you.
teacher. Bye, teacher.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a good night.